Joining me today is Deborah Rudell, author of Grit and Grace, The Transformation of a Ship and a Soul. Deborah Rudell's world unravels when the leaders of her spiritual commune are exposed, arrested, and imprisoned for bioterrorism and attempted murder. Crushed and adrift, she moves her family off the commune to create a sense of normalcy. But when her husband seeks an opportunity to dismantle and rebuild a derelict 50-foot schooner, she uproots their children once again and joins them in Kauai. For the next 5 years, she dedicates her life to restoring a boat. While she grapples with emotional turmoil and contemplates a new life path, she sets out to accomplish something she never thought possible, sailing across the Pacific to the Olympic Peninsula, ultimately discovering her inner strength. Deborah is a graduate of Hay House Writers Workshop and the Certificate in Memoir Writing program at San Diego Writers, Inc. Welcome to the show, Deborah. Nice to have you on.
Thank you, Kathryn. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's quite a story, obviously. You've got two big stories here. The first one on the commune and the second one in building the boat and sailing across the ocean. I want to start with the commune as I described it, because I guess my first question is how and why did you get involved in this spiritual commune? Which ended up being, as I said in the beginning, I mean, people were in prison for bioterrorism and attempted murder. That's pretty scary stuff. Who were these people? How did you get to them?
Yes, I'd have to start when I was a young person, like a child, like 7. And I had a grandmother who exposed me to the spiritual world. She taught me about reincarnation. She taught me about karma. She taught me that I had a spirit and a soul, the unseen world. And so my life was a trajectory into the spirituality right from the get-go. So by the time I was in my early 20s, my husband and I did have a spiritual community in our farm of about a couple dozen people. And when we heard about Rajneesh, of course, we were really excited. And my husband went to Pune, learned about him, sat with him. And then when Rajneesh moved to America in 1980, the commune contacted my husband and asked him to come and be the dentist for the community. So he said, yes, I will come, but only if Debbie can come too. So that's how I ended up in the community in Oregon.
That's how you ended up, but I'm always interested in the emotional attachment. Did you see it coming? Did you see what was going to happen, who you were really getting connected with? Were there any signs? Because when we hear about communes, it's always, at least when it gets into the news, it's usually pretty negative. And,
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And for us on the inside, it was purely a utopian, altruistic, idealistic dream to live together with other people in a sustainable way and in cooperation, people getting together to do things together, to help each other and, make a better place on this world. And that really was our dream. And like all dreams, we're all human and on this planet. So the shadow side in each of us, if we're not aware of it, comes out. And I think for me anyways, this is what the ranch was about. All the idealism, all of our dreams. And as time went on, the darker side came out, the love of power, the exploitation, manipulation, those things came out.
And when they did come out, I'm trying to get the timing of this. Okay, you decided to leave the commune because you weren't feeling, as I said in the beginning, I guess in the intro, you weren't feeling that this was a normal situation. This was not a good place to be, right? Was it hard to leave?
No, it
No?
wasn't like that. It was like we were all going along, and remember, at the peak there were 10,000 people here. This was a self-sufficient huge city that had an airport, it had a substation for electricity, it had a huge big lake dam for water. It was quite a remarkable community. And what happened was at the very end, the leadership left and fled. So first of all, Sheila left and in the middle of the night. And then a month later, this is in 1985, Bhagwan left and he got arrested during his flight when his plane landed on the eastern seaboard to refuel. The FBI arrested him and deported him. So back on the ranch, we were like, what? We had no idea. We were just all doing our thing. And it was very disconcerting, like what has just happened? And of course, people started fleeing because the National Guard came in and it was a big deal. It was very chaotic and a lot of fear.
So
That
they
was when I
well
knew I needed to leave.
to leave, but did they arrest him for because they well, it's an attempted, I mean, arrested and imprisoned for bioterrorism and attempted murder.
But there was the leadership. For him personally, he got deported for immigration fraud. That was the only thing they could get him on. And for the other leadership, yes, those other things, bioterrorism, attempted murder, that came out later. We had no idea.
So, okay, now I'm getting a clearer picture of what the commune was like, and also your involvement in it. So you leave. There's no leadership. This happens. This person gets arrested, and then you decide to go and to take your children or with your husband, I guess, and rebuild this schooner. So how did that happen? Your husband decided to do this. This was going to be something very different than what you had already been involved in. I guess your children too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So like sort of more, I'm trying to get the segue from the commune and give my audience a sense of, okay, how did you go from that to building the schooner
So
emotionally?
but yeah, for the first 2 years after the ranch, we were just trying to get our lives back into a regular life. You know, a nuclear family instead of the big picture, just us instead of a whole big city and community. And that was difficult. And we went back into dentistry and we worked in a little town. And I was quite happy to have a normal life again. My husband was not happy. So he heard about this boat in Kauai and he wanted to go do it. And I thought it was the craziest thing ever. And I didn't want to do it. But
But
go ahead.
no, I was going to say, but you did do it.
But I did do it. I saw that, he wasn't happy and it was much better in the family when he was happy. And so we ended up going there and doing this project. And during the project, we had money so we could just focus on the boat. And as we focused on the boat and all those hours and hours of sanding and varnishing, that was when I had time to think and integrate what had happened to me in a spiritual community with a guru and start to come out of denial about cult aspects of that experience.
So the process of building the boat, I'm thinking about your husband and who is a dentist,
Yes.
and then and joining a commune and then deciding to build the boat. Of course, those are the same, similar skills as being a dentist, perhaps, but the emotional part of it is very interesting, I think, because I wouldn't expect my dentist actually to be able to do that. It's a much more kind of conservative way of thinking, I think. But anyway, so yeah, so just the process of building this boat, then you were able to get in touch with those emotions and
Yes.
yeah.
And having the space, in Kauai, it's so beautiful and balmy and you can swim in the sea every day. And uh, it's a very nurturing environment. And I think just that repetitious the jobs that I had of sanding and varnishing,
Yeah.
um, really were very, very helpful in helping my mind start to think back and have the space and safety to when I came up against the hard things to look at. Like, what happened? Was I really that stupid that I believed this guy, that this was the true thing, that, my inner framework was completely shattered, and how to start facing that, looking at it, seeing the truth of it, and growing from it. And
So
eventually being grateful for it because I learned so much.
well, so there's a great a transformation, obviously, and as I said, and as you said, discovering your inner strength, which was critical. Can people do? I mean, yours are pretty dramatic situations. Can we put it in a context for all of us to learn something from it? And we don't necessarily have to be involved in a commune, or then in order to get back to quote normalcy, build a boat. There's maybe something in between, or
That's a really great question, isn't it?
yes.
I think it depends on our personalities. Some people need really heavy lessons, and some people, stuff, regular, well, not even regular stuff, hard things, divorces, deaths, job changes, losing your home, fires, earthquakes, all of those things make you have to look at yourself and kind of go into introspection and find your way through the emotional upheaval.
Yeah, those are good examples. And of course, the most recent of the fires in California,
Ye-
devastating, right?
Yes, yes.
Um, and those people, as you say, are going to go through similar feelings, probably, that you've been through and have to work their way through, and depending who they are and where they're coming from. What about the kids? Uh, how old were they, and what was their experience from your point of view?
Yes, my kids are all grown now, and so I've had been able to talk to them about it as well. But yeah, Gavin was 5, so he was pretty young. And remember, this community is set up like a kibbutz, so that means the men live in one section, the women live in another section, and the children live in another section. And all our meals are communal: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything's provided. There's no money. So it's a very different lifestyle. Gavin was fine playing with his little friends and running around. And my daughter, she was 11 when we went. And I think that's one area that I feel sad about, because I know that was really hard on her. She had to leave her friends, she had to leave her pony, and that was a big deal. And in hindsight, I see that, and I've talked to her about that.
So very more different experiences given their age and where they were at the time that all of this happened. Yeah. But you say you feel badly about it. Uh, how bad, like badly because she hasn't been able to come to terms with it, or that it should never have, or you wished it had never had happened in her case?
No, there's no regrets, as in I would do it differently in any other way or any other time. Like, it's not like that, but I do have a better appreciation for what I put them through now than I did at the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Well, first of all, you can have a conversation with them, a more grown-up conversation, and I think as time goes on, and tell me if this sort of fits your situation, new things come up. I mean, you're doing different things, and you relate them to the past, and you see the past through different filters, perhaps.
Yes, yes. And we get wiser.
Yeah, we
Absolutely.
we have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get wiser, exactly, and so do your children. So, what and now you feel, if you were to define yourself as a spiritual person, um, now as opposed to when you were defining yourself as a spiritual person when you were on the commune, what's the big difference?
A huge difference. I don't know if you remember in the 80s, but we were in a really different place. Um, Spirituality, it was coming through, but we were in a lot of ways pretty ungrounded. And I don't know if you remember when there was all the flower children, and we used that expression, airhead or space cadet or
Yeah,
airy fairy. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yes, and that was how it was. In order to tap into that, you kind of had to leave this material world. And what I know now, and being on the boat really grounded me. I mean, I was, wood and sawdust and generators, and then on the boat sailing, the gales and the storms. That really grounded me in this physical body, that I was here really solidly. And now when you look around our world, everybody knows what yoga is. Everybody knows what meditation is, and most people have a practice. Back then, that was very unusual. So our world really is growing and expanding and evolving, even though sometimes in some areas it looks like it's not.
Yeah. It looks like well, you can never go backwards anyway. You have to evolve. How you evolve is one thing, right? I mean, we're always
Yes,
going forward. But I'm
yes.
thinking about you, and you were in a commune with 10,000 people, and like a kibbutzim. And so and facing your demons in that context. And then you get on a boat and you're in total isolation facing all of the crises as you described. I mean, just climate
Hmm.
and yeah, totally, really a 180, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So now
And
where are you? You're off the boat, off the commune. You're living in not in isolation, but you, as I think it was described, you live in your house on the West Coast. That's a whole different kind of a situation.
yes, I fully integrated into real society.
You,
And I'm a college professor at a local college, and I like to think of myself, it's almost like being a secret agent in a way. I just have a regular life and I just interact like a normal person and I feel like a normal person. And it's been an interesting life.
yeah, interesting journey. What do your students have to say about this? Because I'm sure you share, I'm making the assumption you share all of these experiences. Of course, in the book, if everybody, you got to get out and get the book if you want to hear the whole story. But what's the response of your students to your experience?
Oh, they wouldn't know unless they ask, I don't talk about, oh, I was in a cult. Like,
Oh,
I
so
don't,
it's a secret.
well, it's not a secret. People ask me, I'll talk about it, but it doesn't come up. You're busy going through school and helping your students navigate the world of dentistry and learning new skills and being a healthcare worker and giving back. And that's the focus. It's not a personal thing and it's not a secret. Yeah. For many years it was, I will admit, because being a sannyasin was a negative thing. And at this point in time, people are much more open and interested and curious.
Well, now that you're on the radio, amongst other things, it's definitely not going to be a secret. It's
No,
out
it's
there,
not a
right?
secret.
Not at
Not
all.
a,
Yeah. But keeping secrets, that's another piece to, I would assume, how it impacted your navigating all of these experience, keeping secrets, because the secrets usually, the truth comes out when you know, eh, right? I mean,
eventually.
eventually.
And 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 yeah, I would like to talk to that a little bit because, when I was at the ranch, there were things that happened that I was privy to because I was sort of looking after the leadership. So I was close in with the leadership. And when I found out that my teacher had lied, because I knew, because I'd been in the situation, but most of my friends and fellow sannyasins, they had no idea because they weren't in the same situation I was in. And what I wanted to do was somehow speak out because I wanted to say what my experience had been for other people that have been in a group and had things happen, and how that feels and how to navigate it. And it took me a long time, but I did finally write my story. And that was partly the reason I wanted to have my voice. I wanted to be able to speak. I can give an example of that if you want.
Yeah, give us an example.
So what happened was after the head of the commune left, the secretary, Sheila, who most people have heard of, she left, and then Bhagwan held a press conference. And in that press conference, he denounced her and was saying things about her that I knew weren't true because I lived in her house. So, so I went to stand up in that press conference, but I realized that, there was thousands and thousands of people there and press from all over the world. And of course, really tight security because it was a volatile situation. And my friends tugged on my arm and, said, don't stand up, because if anyone made a fuss, there were people with Uzis there, to protect Bhagwan, basically. So I sat down. So I had two things that were really pivotal in that moment. And one was that my spiritual teacher lied, which is horrible and earth-shaking, and spiritual people aren't supposed to lie. That's just the way it is in my brain. And I'd given up my whole life to be there and do this thing, and then this guy was lying. So what? So then that was one count. The second count was that I had this huge thing of I wasn't as much in integrity as I wished I was. I didn't stand up. I didn't speak up. I was a coward and I was disingenuous. And that really was hard on me and was a huge part of what I had to process during those early years after the ranch folded.
That's a message. I think that's a really key message for today. Don't, in terms of the politics, not just in the United States, but I would say internationally, globally, it's really time for good people, spiritual people, to not be cowards, but to speak up and don't be disingenuous.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think it's very applicable in our, as I say, in our not in our political climate, but not just in the United States. It's a good message. It's a tough
Yeah,
one.
it's a very tough one. And it took me a while, but this book is my way of speaking up about my experience and how I navigated those very muddy waters.
Yeah, speaking up and giving back.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
you really are giving back. So, we have a few minutes left, but so you're teaching, obviously, that's giving back, and you have a whole classroom or classrooms of kids who are listening to you. And I assume, what else are you doing in terms of in the book and getting your message out? Are you out there lecturing in other venues besides the college classroom?
Well, I just recently retired from private practice as a dental hygienist. So I had captive audiences for, you know, almost 50 years.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
Like
Yeah.
I've been able to speak with people and connect with people and feel people, which is really like a wonderful thing to have that connection. At this point, my book is just coming out this in a few weeks. It's really new, so this is a new profession for
Yeah.
me, speaking out. I joined Toastmasters to learn how to speak.
Well, that's good. That's very
Yeah.
helpful. Yeah. You have lots of yeah. Um, it's interesting to me, and I didn't mention this in the intro, but both you and a dentist and a dental hygienist, and these kinds of experiences, because in my brain they don't go together. So I have to rethink the whole, all of what you've done, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think your analogy about the dentist and the boat was really good
Yeah.
because at one point I say in my book that he attacked that old boat like he would a broken down molar. He
Yeah.
was poking everything, looking for decay and cavities, and he was determined to get down to good solid wood and make this boat sound again. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the vision I had. Okay, so give us some websites or platforms we can go to where to buy the book.
Yes,
And
the book will be available in the usual bookstore places. Um, and it is already on Amazon, although it's on Amazon. And then I have my website, deborahrudell.com, and all the links and information is on there. I have blogs and pictures of the boat and the project on there that are kind of fun to look at.
great. Thanks so much for being on the show today. Fascinating. Really, the book is Grit and Grace, The Transformation of a Ship and a Soul. And I've been talking to the author, Deborah Rudell. Deborah, thank you for sharing your
Thank you,
message. Yeah.
Kathryn. It's been a pleasure.
Joining me today is Christine Miles, author of What Is It Costing You Not to Listen? Nobody seems to listen. We spend all our time communicating, but how much do we spend actually listening? Christine Miles has made it her mission to spearhead a listening movement. Over 25 years of experience in education, emotional intelligence, and psychology has opened her eyes to how poor listening sabotages relationships and organizations. She's developed the listening path, a system that teaches the art of listening as a foundational skill for success in any role or industry. The program caters to two primary audiences, educators and businesses. She believes that this is one step forward toward preparing future generations to navigate a technology driven world with empathy and understanding. Chris, she has actually a master's degree in psychology from the University of Pennsylvania and is an executive coach, entrepreneur, and radio host. She's been recognized as become a recognized world expert in the field of listening differently. Welcome to the show, Christine.
Well, thank you, Kathryn, for having me in that nice introduction.
Okay, the listening path, right?
Yep.
So if we follow that, you say this is the primary audience is educators and businesses, but it's for all of us, I assume. We all need to listen. I want to kind of start with the thing with the sort of the premise. You believe that it is one step forward, the listening path toward preparing future generations to navigate a technology-driven world with empathy and understanding. How do we do that? As I was reading that intro, I was thinking about all this technology. There's always criticism. No one's listening, right? They're just
Yeah.
talking to themselves or online, not talking to people in person. So how does this work? How would that work, I guess? Because we're concerned with future generations, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, it's so even if you take away all the things that technology does to our brains and the addictive nature of it for both adults and children, it's just time we're not spending interacting with somebody. So that muscle is atrophying as far as I'm concerned. So we need to build the muscle back up because the latest research and data, from what they collect online is that the average adult worldwide spends 6 hours and 40 minutes online a day. That's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And that means for this generation, if nothing changes and we don't count their childhood, starting at the age of 16, if they live till they're 80, they'll spend 17 years online. That's a lot of time. So we have to do something to counteract that muscle because we're losing our ability even more so, even though it's not a new problem. It's the problem, in my opinion, is getting a lot worse because of the technology that we're struggling how to empathize, how to communicate, how to focus and be present for people, and certainly how to really understand more than just pay attention. Because listening is really, from my perspective, about getting to the meaning and the understanding, not just listen up and pay attention.
So the consequences are for whether it's a business, whether it's our family, whether it's individual relationships, whatever it is. If we're not listening, then what? What are the specific consequences of that in terms of how we conduct our daily lives?
Well, there's I call it the invisible consequences. It's the poor listening so often goes unnoticed, but it's death by a thousand cuts. So we inflict these small wounds that over time just add up until we're bleeding out, either relationships or opportunities. So let's just take a business example. Let's think about meetings. So if you look at the average adult without listening training, pardon me, basically hears about 25% of what is said. So put 10 people in a meeting. Most people hear 15 minutes of a 16-minute meeting. Think about the inefficiencies and chaos just in that example alone. And then we know the number of meetings, you multiply that in an organization, and it just becomes an exponential thing where we don't even know that we're not getting it because we're not trained to listen. So we don't even know that we're missing as much as we're missing. But it's pretty costly. And most relationships come down to they don't understand me or we don't understand one another. And listening is at the heart of that as well. So how do we nurture that connection versus splinter it constantly?
And talk about splintering constantly. That's in a business meeting. I watch young mothers, fathers, people who are taking care of the kids. Kids are talking to them. This is out on the street or a restaurant or wherever I happen to be, and they are on their cell phones while the
Hmm.
kid is talking. So you
Yeah.
really that's would you call that splintering? I don't know what you would.
I would call that a cut. I would call
Yeah, a
that
big
one of those
a
those
gash.
wounds.
Yeah.
That's right. And it's also what we're modeling. Look, this is the barrage. I mean, I talk about this when I go out and do keynotes that, 100 years ago, every communication was precious. We didn't have all this pace and interruption. I mean, letters took weeks to arrive. So now we're getting these inundated and we are bombarded with messages constantly. And part of the fervor is if I don't keep up with this, I got 10 to do rather than one. And we don't even realize how we're impacting those around us. And so this is the part of the influx that we're dealing with. The heart of the problem is that we're really not equipped to deal with how to listen anyway. And then this just takes us way off the reservation, all this technology. And it's going to continue to have more and more serious consequences because we don't have this skill built into us. And the future workers, especially in the midst of AI, how do you differentiate and how do you have the critical thinking skills and the ability to handle all this technology as it's infiltrating our workplace if you don't have that ability to get to root cause, problem solve, make critical decisions? This is all the foundation. Listening is the foundation of all those skills.
And that was my next question, critical thinking skills, because
Mm.
I mean, that's key too, obviously. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, how do we teach? Because we're bombarded with all kinds of people talking and how how are we going to navigate that? How do we teach? It seems to me we have to start, as you have started in the elementary
Yeah.
school. Like there have to be courses on critical thinking. How do you analyze what somebody is? First of all, you have to hear them, listen to them, and
Yes.
number
Yes.
one, right? But then how do you assess it? How do you assess what they're saying? How do what do you do with your critical
Yeah,
thinking? Yeah.
well, so schools do teach things like that, right? Critical thinking, they teach communication, they teach all these aspects, and listening is at the foundation and all those kind of core curriculum things, but it's not taught. There's no dedicated formal listening training. It's interesting, having worked in business so long, even though I have a background in education, is that if you go to do a sales training, most salespeople tell you they're told to listen. It's 30 minutes to spend on it. And then they go on to knowing about the product, how to navigate the sale, and all the process things. In elementary schools, we're teaching critical thinking and communication, but we're not teaching the foundational skill of listening. So it's really mirroring each other. What starts in elementary school goes to corporate training programs. We need to change that. And we form a lot of bad habits by winging it, which is what we're doing as listeners, because only 2% of people worldwide have any formal listening training. I'd be interested to hear from you, Kathryn. I'm a master's level, like you said, from an Ivy League school. I have a certificate from the Philadelphia Child Guidance Center, which was at the time the renowned facility in structural family therapy, and I have 0 years of listening training.
Well, therapists, I have to say, yeah, I have a master's degree in social work and counseling. That is one of the things that we focus on, how to listen, because you're interviewing clients or families,
Yeah,
depending on what kind of therapy you're doing. So
yeah,
but by the time you're doing, that's a master's degree program, right?
right.
So, but you can be anywhere from 20 to 40 years old. So,
And you may not even get it in that master's program because they're
yeah.
not all there. Are a lot of time in my situation, it was assumed. I was hired as a family therapist at the age of 22 because I had that critical skill because of my upbringing. It was not taught to me. It was, you're good at it. I had a way to go in and build credibility by understanding versus then telling and talking. So it depends on the master's program. But yeah, even so, 40 years old, 25 years old, a lot of habits are formed. So do you want to learn to ski at 5 or 45? I say 5. It's
Yeah.
easier to get on the slope.
Yeah.
So let's put the kids on the
Yeah.
listening slope right away.
No, that's absolutely true. I want to also get into like your personal story because you
Yeah.
talk about, yeah, at 31, you had to turn your life around because you had a car accident. And so it changed your whole, I guess, perspective about listening differently. So how did that work? What happened?
Yeah, so I actually learned as a young person from my mother primarily. She shaped it because she lost her mother from childbirth. She knew that she was the cause of her mother's death, and it was a hole that was never filled. And I saw people, and my mother was like, she lit up the room. She was gorgeous. She was funny and a great listener. But people didn't see the pain that she felt below the surface. And when she talked about it, expressed it, people would rush to remind her like all the great things in her life. And I saw how her pain would worsen through that denial, even though it was well intended. They rushed to fix rather than understand. So I saw the consequences early. And then when I had this accident at 30, well, I was 28, and then I had 3 years of what I call chronic blissful pain until it went acute, where I couldn't pull up my shorts one morning. It was pretty bad. And I had an invisible pain too, because most of the time I looked really good, even though I was in a level 7 to 10 pain. So my mother and I, she had psychological pain, I had physical pain, but both were invisible. So I felt that pain that she felt, but I also saw when people really listened and understood what a game changer it was for me. I saw the power of experiencing that understanding, even though it didn't fix my physical pain, it created relief in a different way. And I thought, but this is really hard for people to do when they haven't experienced something or they haven't seen something. When it's not visible, it's really hard for them to listen and understand because it's out of scope because we don't have this skill building early. So that really formulated a different level of we've got to fix this in me. We've got to fix the communication system because we're so focused on teaching, speaking, and telling and talking and being knowledgeable and not the skill of listening.
Well, let's take those people who had good intentions, like you particularly, because your pain is visible and it's scary to people, usually, very often, or when and other examples of when someone's diagnosed with cancer or
Mm-hmm.
has some other debilitating illness, and people want to talk to be supportive. They
Yeah.
really don't know how to do it because they're terrified, actually.
Yes.
Even if they hear it, they don't
Yes.
know, yeah, how to actually, as you say, they rush to try and fix it, which they
Yeah.
can't, and which kind of
Yeah.
pushes everything, back.
Yeah.
So,
Doesn't it trigger something in our own mortality and our own vulnerability?
yes.
So it's interesting because cancer is a more relatable, and even though it's invisible in many ways too, there are people see the physical consequences of cancer. If somebody's going through chemo or has surgeries, they see that person as a patient. A lot of people suffer from what my mother did psychologically or I did physically, more invisible diseases. Like my back pain is not noticeable to the unless I had a neck brace on, which I happened to have after surgeries. And that's when it really gets tricky because then they don't, it's really hard to conceptualize and see it. And then when you start to talk about it, it's like I'm uncomfortable because you're in pain and I don't like that. So I'm gonna rush to make you feel better. It's well intended, but it is misguided. And part of that, I believe, is because we're not socialized with emotional language, how to ask about it, how to talk about it. And that's the other reason to start early is so that we can create a language of listening that includes not just listening to facts or the circumstances, but the feelings of the individual in those circumstances. And that's whether you're listening to a history story or someone's personal story in the classroom.
Yes. We have to be comfortable, and I think you said this, in our emotional skin, actually, so that we're
Yeah,
able to do that. Now, let's talk about politics today, where it seems that no one's listening.
yeah,
And how does that fit into the political climate
yeah.
that we're experiencing?
Well, I don't claim to be a political expert by any means, but I do believe I'm a pretty good conversational expert. So, and really innovation doesn't happen when we all come to the table with the same opinions, thoughts, and beliefs. So, just the surface knowledge I have about politics, it's really about bringing divergent perspectives together so that we can not agree, but we can innovate and create the best solution. So, I think that is getting lost and it's trickling down to just homes, right? To families where people don't want to even relate or be with each other because they have such opposing political views and they don't know how to have the dialogue around it. It turns into an argument and something very, divisive. So that to me, again, we're putting this generation that's coming into the world now in a really tricky position, because we need to teach them how to have those skills so that they can have healthy discourse, because it's conflict and discourse is such an important part of how to get things done if it's managed well.
Well, that's why we have to start now, as you said, I think, or we said in the beginning, it's the future generations that are critical, because most of these people who are in leadership positions, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yes.
Is it
Come
possible?
on, young people.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's go. We've got, yeah, exactly. Because I don't know how far we're going to get with that group of, I guess there's always hope, but yeah.
Well, let's have hope. I mean, it's the brain is flexible. Let's take it out of the political realm, because we want to change others. Like the number of people that come to me and say, "Can you help my spouse, child, friend listen?" versus "Can you help me listen better?" It's interesting. We crave it. We want to be listened to and heard so badly, and it's hard for a thirsty person to give up their water, right? So we're in a drought of understanding. But we're wanting somebody else to take a different approach with us rather than us take a different approach with them. So I think it really starts there, and I get it, because it's really hard not to be seen, heard, and understood. So we're in universal trouble that way, because I think we're all experiencing that massive drought.
Yeah, we're in a universal quagmire, I guess. That's aren't we? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I believe give to get, right? So I believe, change happens. First of all, when you learn to listen to others, you also learn to listen to yourself, which is critical. And that's also part of the emotional quotient building, that how do you listen to your own instincts, your own voice, your own feelings? So it's twofold. Yes, it's great to listen to others. And I believe giving that gift is the ultimate gift you can give. I experienced that in my 30s profoundly, as I said, when I had that happen. And that's a wonderful thing to give. And it's also really great when you learn to listen to yourself differently.
Yeah, you have to. I find myself, as you're describing that kind of a situation, I sometimes have to, I want to jump in. I mean, I'm very much aware of that, if somebody's saying something that I disagree with or that I don't feel comfortable with, and I want to, I just, the instinct, I don't know, is the natural instinct? Is it something in our DNA? I mean,
well, it's the brain. It's that. So yes, I think so. Limbically, we respond emotionally around the thing. Now, you just described you're aware, and that's part of the emotional intelligence factor, right? You're taking something that's down in the murky waters of the subconscious that most people aren't aware of, and putting it up into the conscious brain where you're more aware of it. So you're slowing yourself down. That's kind of my simplistic way of describing emotional intelligence. But most of the time in our subconscious brain, it's just our impulses, memories, stories, feelings are interfering, and then we just jump. And so it's without consciousness. So that brain, that subconscious mind, is a really tremendous enemy of listening. So it's why we need to train how to listen instead of just expect that with good intentions we'll do it, because there's too much going on in our brains to overcome those obstacles.
You are a U.S. field hockey champion. I have to bring that in because I want to see how listening, we're talking, talk about sports. How does that impact your ability to perform and to be a champion as you are? So tell us about.
Well, I just to clarify, I'm very proud of this accomplishment. So, because I wasn't the most naturally talented athlete by any means. People are like, "You're so athletic." I'm like, "I'm a willed athlete," and it was a long time ago. It was right before my accident. I had made it to the U.S. field hockey trials on 2 occasions, so that meant I was in the top 60. There is a difference between top 60 and top 16, by the way. There's a differentiator there, but it was still a pretty big deal. So, but why did I get there? Because I could read the game. I saw the game, and I'm not being modest. I really wasn't that fast or strong. I was talented because I worked at it, but I knew how to read the game, influence my teammates, and I could adjust to them, and help them adjust to me. My accident took me out of sports for a very long time, and it was torture because I love chasing a ball. I might as well be a dog that just runs for it, And 3 years ago, I picked up tennis as an experiment because I really, my body has been through a lot because I have a 4-segment fusion. But now on the tennis court, when I partner with people, I'm able to help them and manage their emotions if they get frustrated, or you know, hey, let's read what the other team is doing. So I'm not the best tennis player by any means. There's a lot of really great tennis players, but I'm good at that. And that helped me excel in almost everything I did, including the sports field. So listening is really, it's a strategic way of looking at the world because you
Yeah.
scope out more. And so I think it makes you more dynamic in every aspect. Imagine people with real talent. If they add this, it's just such a turbocharger to success in every level, whether you're on the sports field or in the boardroom or in the classroom. Yeah.
So it behooves all of us, no matter what our profession, no matter where we are in our lives, age, whatever, to do this, to be on the
Yeah.
listening path. Not even, we don't have to be 5 years old or
It's never too late to learn a
no.
new skill. What's the joke, Kathryn? How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Just one, but they
Yep.
have to be willing to change it, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, but here's the fun. So here's what I think has been missing with listening skill building is that it's supposed to be fun. Listening is a process of discovery, and I'm a fan of active listening in terms of the intention behind it and the meaning behind it. But that was introduced in 1957, and it was introduced by a psychologist for psychologists. And so there's like 12 things you have to do to actively listen. And I get to list the third on the list, and I see people go, "What? I can't do all that at the same time. It's complicated." So, how do you make it simple and fun? And that's really what I think I've been able to create is a process and a way of describing what and the tools that you need to really make it easier to enact and do. And I see that with people when they get it and when they feel listened to and they have that experience, it really changes what they're willing to engage in to make themselves better listeners.
Yeah, fun, that's such a good word, and exhilarating. It's like a high, isn't it? I would say
It,
it, yeah.
yeah, I mean, look, one of the things that I've been able to do is people have seen me sometimes as the one with the answers or actually someone who is smarter in the room than most, and not because I am intellectually the smartest, but because I take in what people are saying. I'm sure you're going to get what I'm saying here and see things that and hear things that others aren't hearing. And when I am able to tell that back to them, they're their ideas, but they think it's me. And, it's like I'm just recounting all the great ideas you brought together and making sense out of it and the answers are in the room. When you help people bring their own answers to the table, somehow you get the credit. It's
Oh,
interesting.
yes, I like that. So you get the credit.
There's been times where I've been with, and I told a story about this in my book. There's a wonderful leader in a school that I've known for a long time, and we were doing some work together, and I had asked her a lot of questions. We had a session. At the end of the hour, she's like, "You're amazing. I don't know how you figure this out." Blah blah blah. And I had to fess up. I said, "I didn't do anything other than make sure you talked through what you thought the answers were, and then I made sure you knew what they were." Because I said, I can't pretend with you. It's not fair. So,
Yeah.
But when you seek to understand somebody and you tell them their own story, it's a really powerful and rare experience for
Yeah.
someone. I'd like that not to be so rare.
Yeah. We want all of us to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We have a
Yeah.
couple minutes left. So give us websites, platforms we can go to for
Sure.
yeah.
Sure. Well, so we do serve two constituents. We have a licensable classroom program for elementary schools. So the teachers are the heroes. They're the ones that go and implement the program, but it's animated, it's digital. I'm the digital teacher. I'm the animated teacher in the classroom. They can go to the listeningpath.com for that. And then we still service organizations, and they can find us at the same place, the listeningpath.com. And my book is What Is It Costing You Not to Listen?
Great. As always, great having you on the show. And I was listening, I am listening, and so is everybody else. So let's
Thank
get
you,
them.
Kathryn.
Yes, Christine Miles, she's the author. What is it costing you not to listen? Great. Thank you.
Thank you.